with me. Yeah, thanks, guys. You guys helped me out a lot with the issues I was having on my PC and server, so I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Was
All
that
right.
was that the Plex stuff you were talking about?
Yeah, I did the Plex, but what happened was even before that, I lost my TrueNAS password, so I was trying to fix that, get the password and stuff. So he was helping me with
Ah,
that, and then now I have to got to download the new RuPi because mine is too old. So
hmm.
I had to find my micro SD reader, and then after this I'm gonna download it, and then I'm gonna try it out on my Pi 2 AES and see how it goes. But yeah, I'm just as an aside before we start. I'm really impressed so far with Plex. Like Plex has come a long way, and my Rune subscription kind of expired. I think my credit card for whatever reason got locked or something, and then my Rune thing kind of expired. So then I'm like, oh, so I was gonna get renew it, or I was gonna activate it again. But then I just started playing with Plex, and they have an exclusive mode now. So they have exclusive audio, and the interface, not Plex Amp, but the actual Plex software is so far really good. I actually feel smoother and nicer than Rune, and so far I'm liking it. So maybe I might be able to stop using Rune potentially.
Is Plex like a one-time purchase,
Yeah,
or is it
it's what
also a subscription?
it's one time purchase, but I think you actually don't even need to pay for Plex Pass. So I think you could still do all the audio stuff without Plex Pass. So it's technically free, I think.
Ah,
Yeah, so it's pretty cool. Okay, anyways, so why don't we start off with each of you guys introducing who you are, your companies, and maybe a little bit about you, how you kind of got started in audio, and especially in building headphones and stuff like that. So, Ruck, do you want to start?
sure. I'm Ruck with Aurora's Audio. Um, Man, my whole background, that's going to be a little bit long, but I guess I started in I started in the headphone hobby and like I got serious about it in 2013. Um, and then I started writing. Oh, sorry. I started writing reviews. I want to say it was like 2016 or 2017, and I was writing reviews with Ishka on this little site he started called Verum Sonus. And then end of end of 2018, I was on a loaner tour on SBAF for the Kennerton Valley, and it was the first time I'd heard the timpani drivers in a headphone. And at the same time, my business partner Eudes was working on his own like he was playing around with Foster drivers at the time, so um, he was like extracting them out of headphones and trying to use them because Foster uses a very strong glue to affix their drivers to their baffle. So if you want to get them out, you have to like he'd use a bunch of tools to kind of chip them out of the baffles so that he could try to play with them in his own headphones. And at the same time, I had the Valley. I had his a headphone he was kind of prototyping at the time, and I thought, um, well, maybe this timpani driver will work in the enclosure you've created. Maybe you can kind of play with it and see what's going on. So I actually commissioned from him an open back and a closed back with timpani drivers using his enclosure. And he kind of dropped him in, and with just a little bit of fiddling, it seemed to work out. So we kind of started with that, and then 2018 and most of 2019 was like refining the design, finding vendors, um, putting all of our orders in, getting all of that kind of together, figuring out what our total bill of materials was going to be, um, the name, the domain, all of that, like logo design, all that kind of stuff. And then we got the site up. I think it was late 2019 or early 2020. I think it was early 2020. And then we started selling. We started making and selling headphones in 2020. So yeah, that was a little bit long, but that's my background.
Cool, that's awesome. And then Juan, what about you?
Yeah, so I'm Juan from Erebus Acoustics here in California. Well, now I'm in Ireland, but basically started this as well. Initially, the concept started as I was in my first year of computer science. I had been in the audio hobby for a few years by that point, but really this kind of came down to mostly a learning process. My roommate and I, we were kind of screwing around. We put together money and got a 3D printer and a mini DSP ears and just started throwing crap together onto whatever would fit into an HC600 headband. Weird like Peerless driver and cost driver stuff. And then COVID kind of split us apart, but I kept working on it because I had I kept some of the equipment and yeah, it just kind of snowballed into this project where I had something that was apparently pretty marketable, and I started bringing it to I started bringing this headphone prototype over to like the home entertainment show and stuff like that. Um, and working on like the electrical filter circuit for the bass extension and getting better at the industrial design as I started moving my career towards industrial design. And so now I'm an industrial design senior, and this past year was the first ever product run of a 15 unit headphone run from Erebus Acoustics, my little now one man show.
Cool, that's awesome. And then Gaz?
Yeah, I think I joined Audiophilia 2017 when one of my headphones broke. It was like a Grado 80E, and that's kind of when I really fell deep into it because nothing really sounded like that. And tried to find something close. I guess the Porter Pro is close. It'd be better in some ways, but later on, I saw met up with Tommy and Ev, and they showed me some stuff they were working on before ETA, and I was like, wow, this stuff is really cool. I didn't know you could do this, and ever since then, I've been pretty hooked, and I've been working with them for I think over a year now with ETA.
Okay, cool. That's awesome. So, yeah, what? Why don't we start off with what your goals are with your companies and your projects that you're working on? Like, what's your kind of latest project, or the kind of latest vision, or what direction you're going? Maybe the product before, or the product that just was released, and then kind of where you're going after this. And anybody can go. It's just free for all.
All right. I guess I think you've heard me say this on the server like a million times at this point, right? But uh, our like my goal with our stuff is it's all down to like tone, timbre, and dynamics. I feel like everything kind of flows from that. That's like those are the three basic factors to the sound of something um that that it kind of make the sound, right? Like I think like people talk about detail, people talk about soundstage, and all these other factors. I think it's a lot of it comes down to a combination of those three things and how those like interact and work together. So the focus is on for me is on those things and ultimately coming to a combination of those things that I like. So we did that with Borealis and Australis, and we're doing something similar with with the new stuff that we're working on. Currently unnamed project, so you can just kind of call it Borealis 2 and Australis 2. But the new stuff we're working on is a customized driver. Um, mainly, mainly what we customized was the diaphragm, and then some of the other aspects of the driver, like strength of the magnetic circuit, and coil impedance. And then the sort of the damping scheme is something that I think we finally kind of settled on something that we think works. Um, and again, just kind of targeting those same qualities, like getting as much of the dynamics as we can out of the drivers, um, and kind of getting a good tone. And by tone, I mostly just mean like frequency response, just kind of getting a balanced, um, neutral-ish, as much as you can define what neutral is, neutral-ish kind of a tone, um, and natural timbre that kind of shows you, um, that provides a good contrast of the different instruments. Like the easier you can tell apart two different guitars, or even just kind of like the background and atmosphere of two different recordings. um, I think that's important for a headphone, but also just kind of generally your chain, to be able to show those those subtle differences and the contrast between those things. So that's kind of what we target.
What's your iterative process like? So, or is it mainly just you and your team kind of just listening to your successive products, or do you have like a test group, or do you send out units to people you trust, or how does that work?
So yeah, mostly it's an iterative process, and then in between, when we kind of feel like we have something solid, is when we'll start to kind of send it out to people we trust and get their feedback. Um, Usually by the time we do that, we're pretty close to a final design, and we're just kind of doing the final tweaks. Um, Ultimately, we're not going to like take some feedback and radically change the product, because to get to a point where we're ready to share it, we have to like it a whole lot before we do that. Um, so yeah, mostly it's just internal testing. Um, we use our existing products kind of as a benchmark right now for that, in addition to other stuff that we like, and tend to gravitate towards and listening. And then yeah, once we get it to a good state, we'll start to send it around to just a very small group of people to get their thoughts.
Cool, cool. So, excuse me, Gaz and Juan. What about you guys?
Uh, Man, we go through so many revisions. It's crazy sometimes, or like the smallest things. But you get your customizations in, and sometimes it's not sufficient, so you customize again and again and again and again. Sometimes you hear 20 to 30 different models, and you're really listening to it. I mean, people always like to say it's like, oh, I took the cables, but we tweak with voice coils, surrounds, diaphragms, motors, all of it. For design, usually we have a pretty good idea of what we want to do, but overall, the driver tends to influence the design. So we have some things we do and things we look for in a driver for specific designs. That's generally how it goes, and we get together, we do a design session, sometimes over many weeks, and we make them, and then when we think they're good, we tweak them again until they're perfect, until there's no itch, until there's like nothing we really worry about, like sound wise. Then we hear them, and then we agree, and it's a product at that point.
So Ruck mentioned, focusing on tone, timbre, things like that, while also having neutrality. Is that do you have does ETA have a similar philosophy, or what's the ETA philosophy?
We get Ev to listen to it ad nauseum, and until Ev is satisfied, it's not a product. So it's really, a lot of it is on Ev's voice, or ears, I guess, but mostly voice.
Just like a kind of like a boutique tube amp maker or something like that, who kind of puts their heart and soul into a product and kind of voices it. rather than something that's very commercialized and it's just kind of driven by profits and stuff. It's more of a true art form, I guess.
It does not scale the process. No, it is
Right.
literally for every single unit. But we're looking at other ways to scale, I guess you would say. But it's everyone goes through Ev, no matter what.
Yeah, and another kind of, I guess, sort of commonality I've noticed. I mean, I've never heard Ruck or Juan's headphone. Obviously, I have the O2 from you guys from ETA, and one thing I've noticed is a bit of an emphasis on bass, at least relative to a lot of other headphones, and I've heard that about your headphones too, Ruck. That the bass is extremely satisfying. So is that, and I guess, and I'm sorry, I'm not trying to neglect you, Juan. I'm going to come to you, but is that also part of? Is that of great importance? Like when you guys listen to headphones, is the bass kind of like the foundation, and do you find it lacking in a lot of commercial offerings?
I think it has to go somewhere close to 40 hertz. I think we really push for that. In earlier models, there was a bigger emphasis in bass, and the slope target was totally different. Some of our um, some of our fans really liked the early model because the bass was like ridiculous. It was like such a downslope. But now in 2023, that's like a really popular like target. It's kind of ridiculous, but our voice definitely has changed from our first product to O2, but I think we'll figure out what people really like, and I think people will be super surprised with what's coming up because it's a flavor thing, right? But we can't lose our voice to the feedback we get.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And Juan, well, what about you? Like, how do
Yeah.
you voice your headphones?
Okay. So I guess in terms of like voicing and like this kind of goes back to general sort of product R&D. When I throw together an enclosure, right? So my process has changed a lot over the years. Like with Everest, it was kind of this like really, baby steps, one thing at a time, tweaking little things here and there, as I was learning how to build a headphone. And lots of kind of people gave their input and have come and gone over the years, and so it was kind of shaped by that and the real manufacturing constraints around it that I had to work with. Um, but at the end of the day, it kind of just came down to, especially before I had like a decent measurement system, it just kind of came down to, well, does this sound nice, and does the graph look normal? And then I'd bring it out to a trade show, and if people would kind of help me nudge it from one direction or the other. Again, I was learning kind of where I wanted to, where the headphone would go, and what people would like, and what I liked as well at that time. These days, the process is a little bit more straightforward. So, and this ties into the first question that you had, which was, kind of where's the brand going or whatever. What kind of direction each of us going in, and so I've actually been working on a new headphones concept. Um, and with that one, it was kind of like, well, I have a driver and I have an enclosure, and basically the industrial design is kind of coming first now, and then I can kind of and then I would kind of figure out, okay, which direction do I want to take the enclosure in, and then tweak the enclosure to that, and then like basically from the get-go coming in with kind of a target to hit, and then going to the trade shows and then seeing, okay, well, uh, will people notice like a peak here, or what do I need to go around and tweak and refine these smaller things, to get something that I like and that my customers like and that does well on the show floor. Um, and so yeah, like basically with everyone else though, it's an iterative process. I do like to throw out my prototypes just kind of into the can jam sort of Shark Tank of sorts to get feedback. But otherwise, it's just tweak and listen and tweak and listen.
A lot of tweaks.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So measurements are kind of very popular in certain communities and among many audiophiles consumers. So I was curious kind of where that factors into everything. So far, you guys have told me that your voicing is kind of done kind of by listening, which I would assume that's the most important thing. But do you start with measurements and then listen after, or is it kind of going back and forth? Are measurements like not even really that much of part of the whole iterative process? Where do measurements kind of come into play, if at all, when you're designing headphones? And go. It's like a free for all. Go ahead. Anybody wants to talk, go ahead.
I would say for us, um, we're both pretty consistent in terms of what we like. So once we land on something we like, they tend to measure pretty similar. Um, so we use measurements a little bit, mostly just to make sure that there's nothing grossly wrong. But really, most of that we can catch just in listening to it. So um, it's useful, but only to a certain extent. Really, a lot of the stuff that we end up listening for is just not stuff that at least I don't know how to interpret for measurements.
Yeah, that makes sense. That things measure similarly once you hit a certain sound that you like. I like that philosophy. What about you, Juan and Gaz? Any thoughts on measurements?
Yeah. So right now, at least, well, I use measurements a lot. I mean, I have to verify everything. I don't have like a second person to kind of back check all the time where we have like the same preferences and all that. So I do have to use the measurement rig a lot. But there was also a time period where I didn't have really any useful measurement rig at all for anything past like 1 kilohertz. So um, back then it was really just check by ear and tweak a little bit, and if I couldn't hear like a peak or whatever, then it'll just stay there, whatever, it doesn't matter. These days though, I have the tools, so I try to get granular with it and really see what's going on in the FR to really push the headphones past just this fake sense of being okay with me. So yeah, I guess I've been using it to get a little bit more meticulous with the tuning process, and it's been working out pretty well in my opinion. So there's that.
Cool. And then Gaz, any thought on measurements?
I think measurements are pretty gatekeepy most of the time. I think they're super obnoxious because it doesn't. I mean, it kind of accounts for an average, but it depends. If you like that average, like if you got a certain amount of hearing loss, you might not like it if you're a certain age and your experiences. So, generally not a fan. I think they're a useful tool to understand differences, like and checking production line. But I value the Thiel small parameters much more than I do a frequency response graph. But trying to develop headphones for a target, I think, is foolish because what they don't tell you is the distortion measurements. I mean, you can see some artifacts in a frequency response graph, but most of the time it's like obscured. Like you don't see the distortion. You don't know what measurement, what SPL they measured at. Like, is it 104? Is it 110? Did they measure it at 80 SPL. Like I saw someone do an 80 SPL measurement, and they said their headphone had low distortion. It was like, of course it does. Put it up 20 dB and let's see if that's still true. It's probably not. But that's how I feel about it. I think there's more than the frequency response graph. I think the TS and I think distortion matters a lot. I don't think it's standardized enough, and most measurements are actually all influenced by like one big company. So I think that's their push, not necessarily the listener's push, but they're tools.
Yeah, it's interesting because different people have kind of different philosophies about it, and some people, like I think we know the communities that are very, very aggressively on the side of measurement, dictating everything to the point of listening almost not even mattering, and then people who are kind of like me, who are all on the ultimate other extreme almost. So it's interesting to see where everybody falls on that spectrum. Now, I wanted to touch on kind of commercial headphones a bit, not to take away from what you guys are doing, but just interested in your thoughts. So, I mean, obviously, you guys are coming at this problem from a kind of different angle, from a more handcrafted, handmade, more thoughtful, potentially thoughtful angle, rather than like the corporate mass scale angle. And also, your products are generally much more affordable than a lot of the high end, quote unquote, high end offerings from the commercial makers. So, do you guys feel that there's a bad trajectory for the commercial headphone market in terms of the performance and value kind of equation being worse and worse as time goes on? More and more, $2, $3, $4, $5,000 headphones, and some of them maybe not even being as good. Again, I'm not saying that price equals performance, but not even being as good as much more affordable headphones that have more thoughtful tuning put in, more thoughtful design put in. Do you see a bad trajectory in general? I'm not trying to name names, but is that something that comes to your mind? And was that a part of your decision making to pursue this, to build headphones?
I guess I'll start. Yeah, I think the industry is going in a direction that I don't like personally. I think we've kind of um, simplified and maybe commodified what makes a headphone good, and I think a lot of the sort of pro measurement and the attitude that measurements kind of define everything about how something sounds is partly responsible for that. Because now it's just become kind of, as long as it hits the target, it's good. Um, and it's also really strange because now you have cheap stuff that's hitting the same target as expensive stuff, and somehow the expensive stuff is still getting more expensive. Um, and from a if you're looking at it from a like measurements only perspective, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Oh,
Yeah, go ahead. Feel
just,
free.
yeah, I'll
Anybody else,
just
go ahead.
pick up from there. Yeah. Um, I don't know. I mean, we have to remember that this is fundamentally a luxury goods market, right? If we're just talking about the audiophile industry, and right now is a time, well, for the past, for about as long as this industry has existed, wealth has kind of generally been accumulating into the type of people who would, go out and want to spend their excess on stuff like this. They're trying to find something to spend their money on, and obviously our little industry is adapting to that by producing these crazy like $5,000 headphones that, like Ruck kind of said, aren't really performing any better than much cheaper stuff, especially nowadays. So the cheaper stuff is getting much better, and there's getting this kind of like a stratification of pricing on the other end of the spectrum with these headphone manufacturers. Personally, I just I don't know. I kind of just ignore that. HG600 came out 30 years ago, and I don't know. It's like the the whole discussion is just kind of I don't know if it can really go anywhere. But
Yeah,
I don't know. I
Yeah.
I don't
like
mind
at
if
the
it's
same time
more
as all this
expensive.
stratification's been happening, the cheap stuff's been getting much better, and headphones have been pretty good for a long time. So yeah, it's not something I'm too worried about.
Yeah, I'm not worried about it. I think it's a good thing. It makes me look better.
I mean, that's definitely true. Like there's a lot of opportunity to provide value. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think
Um,
people deep in the hobby know that, and I'm not too worried. Like, I don't need a. I'm not gonna make like a Call of Duty headphone edition, But
I, Actually, yeah, you have a
yeah.
good point too. Like all three of us are in a position to where, we can make headphones that cost less than $1,000 and still presumably be profitable,
yeah,
right?
I mean,
It's not,
Yeah.
I can
you
only
know,
imagine how much money is
we're
ramping up.
not Yamaha, so it's like
Yeah,
we
I,
can actually look better than them.
I can't. Yeah, I can't
Oh,
make 1 million of
Yamaha.
my headphones. So,
Yeah.
dude, that'd be awesome. Imagine what the heck.
Uh,
Yeah,
yeah, but it's like you're saying, Juan, I feel like the market for the stuff at the very top is also shrinking, and that's part of why the prices are going up. Um, because the floor is rising, right? The really cheap stuff is getting at least more Harman target compliant, if nothing else. And so on average, it's sounding less wacky, and more normal, even if it doesn't have those sort of intangible qualities that I was talking about earlier. Um, so, I, and if more people are looking at it from a measurements only perspective, and they're looking at getting something that just measures well, um, and there's less of a market then for the luxury stuff, it just kind of makes sense, I guess. The prices are rising the way that they are.
I think people seek an experience regardless of price, but if they can afford it, it's definitely an experience they're willing to pay for.
Yeah, I just don't know. I guess I don't know how many people even know what experience they're looking for until they
Oh,
have
that comes much later.
it.
is there a pressure you guys feel because uh, I think sorry, I'm not sure if it was Juan or so who said this, but it is a luxury market, but obviously there's stratification of the market, right? There's places like Headfi or you know those types of communities, and then there's places like what's best for them, right? Where the average person has like a $500,000 system. Um, do you guys feel pressure to kind of appeal to those people that are buying the Sasvaras of the world, the 1266s of the world, by making your product more fancy or kind of appealing to the whole fashion fi thing that Zach always talks about? Is that in your mind at all? Maybe obviously not now, but going forward as your companies grow, is that something that you think about, the cosmetics, or not really?
Um, for me, it's definitely secondary. I kind of feel bad for those people, and I want to save them. I know I can't, but um, yeah, it's definitely a form follows function thing for me.
It depends. I mean, I want people to like it, obviously, but I'm not gonna copy someone else to become more popular. No, I've seen that
So
recently.
sorry.
Go on.
So on my end, I'm an industrial design student. So yeah, aesthetics and the form of the product, especially going forward, um, as I'm trying to put together the capacity to make everything from the ground up, not just rely on like Odyssey to make my headbands and then have to conform to their dimensions and all that, but really making something that looks nice and appeals to not, maybe not to like the fashion-fied level of, the kind of person who will buy a Diana or Utopia, but yeah, definitely, I want to appeal to at least some of that, um, and make something that is at least competitive in terms of design, and making that something that looks and feels nice and approachable, while also making it sound very good, and again, not having it cost $5,000, because I think that's silly.
Yeah, I mean, I want to be unique. Like Rex said, like it doesn't really look like our design, but it might look more like his for some other headphone. But I don't think. I mean, we designed based on acoustics first, and then the other
Yeah.
stuff is auxiliary. But
Yeah, we pick a driver and then we design the enclosure around that. Um, we landed on a pretty flexible enclosure design with our first design. Um, so I guess we were kind of lucky in that way. I think even our new products are probably going to reuse a lot of the stuff that we developed. And then other things we're always looking to improve. Like we're always looking for ways to kind of save weight, to improve the comfort. We've gone through one headband revision and we're tossing around ideas for another one, but we don't have anything concrete yet. Um, but but really, we're mostly just trying to maximize for acoustics and comfort.
It's a perfect segue because I was actually wanting to get into the comfort kind of aspect of things. So obviously, it's difficult sometimes to balance those things. Like you may have a headphone that sounds incredible, but it's just by the very nature of getting that type of sound, the comfort is compromised. So it's a kind of I would suspect a balancing act that you have to do. Maybe you can make a headphone much more comfortable with bigger, thicker, plusher pads, but then that ruins the sound quality. So how do you, in your iterative design process, how do you think about comfort as you go through? Is that something that you think about as you go on through the whole way through, or do you focus on sound quality first and then do comfort after, or vice versa? Where does that get integrated into the process?
It's for us. It's definitely acoustics first. So we won't do like the deep pad if it's going to ruin the acoustics of the design. Um, and I think um, as far as comfort goes, like it's really hard to figure that out because there are very few things that everyone thinks is comfortable. Um, I would say it's as, if not more, subjective than sound. Um, just so many head shapes,
ears.
wider ear shapes. It's just hard to design for everyone. So there's um, part of it is just you kind of have to settle on a design and go for acoustics first. And if it's comfortable for you, it's going to be comfortable for a segment, at least, of the market. But I don't think you're ever going to design something that's comfortable for everyone.
Presumably, you want a headphone that's comfortable for as many people as possible. But as you said, it's impossible to be comfortable for everybody. But something like you know 1266 cc or headphone V1 stuff like that, I mean, is probably not comfortable for a huge proportion of people. Maybe not the majority. Maybe the majority still find it comfortable, but certainly many people find the ergonomics very poor. And so, ideally, you don't want to be at least in that type of category.
Yeah, I think you want to keep your sort of your design like somewhat conventional. Definitely took inspiration from some other headphones out there when we designed ours. And so, it kind of it looks like a headphone for a reason, right? It's we took elements of those designs because we understood that kind of fits the average. Like 1266 TC is not an average looking headphone by any means, right? It's like a very very different from a conventionally designed headphone. Anywhere, like in any part of the market, you're really not finding a headphone designed like that.
Yeah.
Um,
It's cool though.
it's cool. I don't know that, or at least I don't understand how
You didn't
even the
get there?
makers find that super comfortable. Um,
Yeah, that was
I
kind of
for me
interesting.
personally, it wasn't comfortable, but
It's an
maybe it
iconic
is for
design.
them. I don't know. It certainly is an iconic design, and there is something to that, right? Gaz, like you were talking about, having that visual identity is another important aspect of the marketing.
Some people say it's a medieval torture device.
Oh, is that a good thing or bad
Yeah,
thing?
I don't know how to wear it, to be honest.
Yeah, and then like that reminds me of stuff like the MySphere, where it's like super finicky and like you have to get the angle perfect, and like it's like this halo thing on your head, and yeah, like
Yeah, but
Yeah.
that's iconic too. Coming from the K1000.
I think that kind of plays into the whole kind of user experience thing, where how is there obviously with speakers, there's a whole thing you have to go through with positioning and angles and stuff like that, toe. Whereas ideally you would think that headphones are not so much like that, especially circumaural headphones where you just put them on and you go. But I guess some of the designs, that is a factor.
Well,
Even getting a
well,
seal on everyone's head is tricky.
Oh, you can't do it.
well,
Like,
yeah, positional variance is yeah, it's still a thing on headphones, and yeah, seal how much you can actually seal on the head, and how much leakage tolerance you have. That's all. Yeah, that's all going to be a factor still. We're still talking about small,
And then it's
tiny enclosed
preference.
loudspeakers with all the funky stuff that goes with it.
Yeah. And then it's preference. You see that a lot in IEMs. People are like, "Oh man, I love the foam tips," but the designer's like, "What the heck?
yeah,
You're
Yeah,
and
breaking the seal. What are you doing? You're messing it up." Person,
how they
I
fit
love it.
the fit of IEMs is like another hugely subjective thing, right? Some people love those like bullet style headphone IEMs, and other people can't stand them.
yeah, I just straight up can't fit big IEMs in my ear, so that's always a struggle. Um, yeah, back to the conversation on comfort though. So like with Everest, one of the things that happened like midway through development was I actually switched pad suppliers. Or not, yeah, I switched pad suppliers, but I also switched pads. Like the final production model, the pads were a completely different material and much thinner than it was originally planned, and I had to like add in some plastic bolstering and like supports to still keep it conformed around the head nicely. Um,
Yeah.
and that was mainly because of sound quality, trying to reduce resonances as much as possible. Um, with the new design, the Sierra concept, that one's a closed back, so I have to deal with different parameters there, and it's like one is I go into it trying to make something comfortable, right? Not like a good headband that avoids pressure points and is adjustable and all that, and with good compliant pads that seal and are comfortable and nice, breathable at the same time. So there's kind of like a whole rabbit hole to go through there, trying to make something that conforms to the head now before I go so deep into the acoustic process. Just because in this particular case, like it needs to be something that conforms to the head, or else it might not seal properly, and then next thing you know, half your user base won't have any bass response, right? So um,
Yeah.
it kind of all meshes together, I think.
That's what I feel the general impression of the Grail phone is. People didn't get a proper seal and they hated it.
Hmm. in my experience, thinner pads usually sound better, which sucks.
Depends how much. Yeah, I mean, there's so much into that. It's like you want to offset
Right,
what
yeah, like
what's your radiating closest radiating surface, like what walls are there, and all this stuff. But
Yeah,
right, and also like if it's asymmetrical versus like a symmetrical pad, if you make it asymmetrical, maybe you can go deeper on it without having the same resonance issues. And yeah, it's this whole back to this whole experimental process.
people generally don't really understand that though. I'm like,
no.
nope, make them bigger. I want bigger pads. I want them.
That's why we see so many aftermarket pads on like normal larger market headphones. Like when I see aftermarket pads on a Sennheiser, it kills me a little bit inside because I just know how it's ruined the sound, but people don't notice. They're just like, yeah,
No,
it sounds exactly like it did before, but it's way more comfortable now.
but it doesn't.
Well, on my end, I have a friendly relationship with Dayconi.com. So if someone doesn't like how the Everest feels on their head, Dayconi.com right there. Stick whatever pads you want on it. Detachable. So,
Nice.
but yeah, not my problem.
I
Yeah.
suppose I suppose you can, of course, design headphones that have thinner pads that sound better but are still also comfortable. Like the thing that comes to my mind is the most comfortable headphone I've ever used is HD 800, in my opinion. Like I find it so incredibly, the way it sits on my head, I just love it, and it has obviously very thin pads. But then of course it has a big cup, and sometimes you don't want a cup that big. You don't want a chamber that big, I guess.
Yeah, I think the new Grail phone kind of addresses that. Like bigger pads, smaller cup, still angled.
Yeah,
Uh, I mean, in the end, it's still we're still dealing with kind of the same volume
Yeah,
question there of how big
yeah,
do you want the space in front of the driver to be? That's
yep.
regardless of whether you do that with the cups or the pads, it's still kind of the same question in the end.
I think that's what makes the design interesting for all the headphones. Um, like the HD 800 or the 1266 or an IM, I guess. I'm not really familiar with other headphones. Let's see. 109. There you go. Original headphone. I mean, the sound is like, I don't know how to say this. It is the end of the equation. All the
Yeah,
other parts, like the angles, the pad length, the material,
yep,
the airflow, like that's the equation. But
yeah. I mean, that's why I say acoustics first.
yeah, some people
That's
are
kind of how we approach for that reason.
one first, and you can
Yeah,
definitely tell.
yeah.
Walk me through like the fundamental steps of the design process. Do you start with the housing first? Do you start with selecting a driver first? How what's what are like the big milestones or big algorithmic pathway when you're designing a headphone?
Um, I feel like at least for us, we kind of with our first headphones, we picked a driver first. Um, well, actually, that's not even true because the enclosures were already built and designed around another driver, and then we subbed it with a driver that we could source more easily that worked. So I don't know. It's mostly a back and forth. Like
Yeah,
with the new headphones that we're designing, we we picked a driver, we started working around that, and um, then we went back and tweaked that driver a whole bunch. Um, so uh, so we picked the driver, we got the enclosure, then we started tweaking the driver again. And now we're coming back around to the enclosure and like little tweaks that we need to make to that. So um, it's it's just a lot of back and forth and kind of tweaking everything to get the sound that you want at the end.
Yeah, for us, it's definitely back and forth too. I mean, some of it is electrical parameters. That kind of tells you a lot, but it's not just that, and you can't just rely on that. Like, you have one shell design, and then you put stuff in, and you see how it changes, where the modes are. Your resonant frequency, and the breakup of your surrounds, and how stiff is your diaphragm. Any other voice coil reflections going on? That's a big thing.
Okay. What about? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh yeah. So my process, I guess, again, like I've been mentioning before, it's changed quite a bit. With Everest, it was kind of this big messy thing. These days, though, it's pretty it's a lot more straightforward. It's like, because right now I'm trying to make a completely new platform, so it started off just with getting some concept designs thrown together. It started with form essentially. Um, I had a couple of basic prototypes. Passed them around the design department. Just some crude 3D printed mock-ups, and then I started focusing on the headband, trying to figure out what's going on there. And then, once I had a rough idea of where I wanted to take the whole headphone design, I split it off kind of into two parts. So part of it was the headband and ergonomics, and then the other part was the acoustics. So once I had a general idea of how big I wanted the cup to be, then I could tweak it around, and I can tune the acoustic response as much as I wanted to there. And then on the other hand, I was continuing to adjust the ergonomics of the headband, which were a really big hurdle to get through at the time. And then now it's okay. Well, now it's kind of all back together into this single concept design that all works together. And yeah, I found that to be a lot faster than the old method that I used to use of just seeing, just throwing together whatever goes.
Every possibility. You don't like that?
Yeah, like every part that would come by, throwing it in and seeing what happens, stuff like that. Now it's more streamlined.
Nope, that one doesn't work. I have a question for you guys. Do you guys like front dampening?
No.
Juan,
Yes.
you like it?
Yeah, it's to me it can be a necessary evil sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, it just wherever the enclosure calls for it. If I need to damp some resonances and I can do it via a piece of foam, then I'll do it via a piece of foam instead of instead of throwing the entire front enclosure design out.
Why don't you like it, Rook?
I mean, I just don't think it sounds good. I think I would rather address those kinds of issues with the pads and the baffle.
Do you guys think ring radiator counts as front dampening or no? Or Helmholtz, if you want to be fancy.
I would say that's like no Helmholtz. I wouldn't consider front damping.
It's part of the whole front setup, but yeah,
it's part of the front setup, but it's like a filter more than it's really.
It's a narrow band filter rather than a general damping effect.
Yeah.
And then what about rear chamber damping and like stuffing in the rear chamber?
Also against it. Also against.
Yeah, we don't do that in our designs anymore.
I mean, it depends on what you're trying to do with the enclosure. How power efficient are you trying to get the thing? Or do you, for some reason, have some weird issues that need to be damped out of the enclosure, and why?
What FPL are they going
to be avoided by making the whole thing open back or by making the enclosure smaller or whatever. So yeah, that's like a huge question of whether or not do I or do I not stick this foam back in the back of the enclosure? That's kind of a very big question.
Like the angel hair people put in some of their cups.
That was an old meme. I mean, I guess it depends what you're talking about. Like none of the drivers that we use, and even I was talking about how we settled on a back damping scheme for the drivers in our new headphones. So if you're talking about like even the damping paper on the rear of the driver, like yeah, I think that's kind of a necessary evil. Like you need to play with that and kind of get it to the right spot. But I don't really want to do a whole lot outside of that. Like in a closed back, yeah, you have to play with the baffle and play with the rear chamber a little bit to damp the back wave reflection, but really try to keep that as minimal as possible.
Yeah. Not like opening up a Fostex and just throwing stuff in there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to like I don't love it. I don't love the way it sounds when hear a headphone that's like stuffed with like foam and sponges and carpet liner and like all of that
Oh yeah,
stuff
yeah.
that people use. Like I think it has an effect. I mean, it does um, alter the way that the diaphragm moves.
Yeah, I think a lot of innovation is actually in IEMs. IEM designs are so crazy. I'm looking at one right now. This thing is nuts. Look at this thing.
IMs are pretty nuts.
What about things like these meta materials that people like Dan Clark and Zach are coming up with? Do you have any opinion on those types of things?
Metamaterial like what Dan is using to me is still front damping. What Zach is doing is in the rear chamber. Um, and I don't really know what to think of it because it doesn't seem all that different from other more conventional rear damping schemes I've seen.
I think it's
Well, it's a
sounds
series
cool.
of resonators, so it's targeted towards.
He like kind of splits the rear chamber into two chambers.
I don't know if we would do that. I don't think so.
It's a tricky thing to like actually be able to utilize effectively.
Yeah,
Um,
I think because we do additive manufacturing, we'd rather have it built in than it be an extra part.
Hmm.
well, that yeah, and isn't that what DCA does?
Yeah, but not. We wouldn't do it in the front.
Ah.
I just mean like I don't know how many soft materials we would use in a design. I worry about the wear and longevity of them.
Uh,
I think he does it because he wants to control the leakage of that chamber within the chamber. I very quickly glanced over the patent for his uh, um, what is that called? ADFS or something? Atrium damping
is,
system.
is, are you talking about the
That's
front
the
like array
No,
that they
he's
have
Oh
in?
no,
foam.
ZMF's atrium damping system. The
The
metamaterial stuff seems
trademarks,
pretty
you can't even do it.
straightforward to
Okay,
me.
I haven't seen whatever ZMF is doing. Sorry.
Oh, okay. What Dan is doing, um, is he using it in the rear chamber in his closed backs? Because that to me makes a little bit of sense.
Uh, just I don't think there's anything to point to them doing anything too special in the rear. So
Hmm.
I think the main focus was just on really tweaking the hell out of that treble response with that front resonator array.
I see. Yeah, that
Regardless,
I'm not so much a fan of.
I think it's cool that everyone does it differently and gets their sound that they're that they like, and um, I don't think we will be pursuing any of those technologies.
Same.
Yeah.
Do you
I rely on electrical filters a lot to tweak the sound, so I don't really
Yeah.
consider the resonators necessary. If I can, if it's easier for me to calculate and easier for me to package with just like an electrical component, then
Yeah, that's super unique.
just don't need the resonator.
How important is it for you guys to design headphones that are more portable, easier to drive, potentially lighter, and kind of something you could take and just kind of connect to a portable source and listen while you're commuting, that kind of thing? Is that something that you factor in as you're designing a headphone, or you forget about that and just focus on maximum sound quality?
We definitely focus on the acoustics first, but I think a lot of the principles of our approach to design kind of lend themselves to being more sensitive. The new stuff we're doing uses 300 ohm drivers, so but I can still run it off my iPod. I'm just like
Yeah.
90% on the volume on that iPod compared to like 50% for our production stuff right now. But I do like being able to plug it into a portable source and like walk around or like sit on my deck and listen to something while I sit outside. Um, so I I also just they're headphones. Like I hate the idea that you're tethered to you're strictly tethered to these giant boxes. At your desk or your listening station or wherever it is that you listen. I think it makes sense for a headphone to run off of portable sources more easily and you know um, be portable at least in term or transportable in terms of being able to listen to them other places. Like our designs, they're full size headphones, so they don't exactly travel like great, you know. I mean, I can throw mine in a bag and I don't really have a problem with that. I don't have to put them in a case or anything. Um, but it's still not as compact as something like an IEM or something like that.
Yeah, I think impedance and sensitivity are not mutually exclusive. I think you can have both. You had a 300 ohm driver, but for some reason the 32 ohm sounded different enough that we went with that. But the most transportable or portable one we have is definitely the mini series because it folds. The folding is just crazy. Um, but looking forward, people want it. People want something that they need to have monoblocks for, and I definitely have something like that if people want it. But is that my preference? No, because I wouldn't be able to enjoy it, and that's a bummer. But we've acquired more, I guess, test equipment to understand some of the experience, and if you want it, we can do it. But what we use the most is stuff that's more efficient, and efficiency is a double-edged sword, of course, because of Johnson noise. But if I could have it be IEM efficient, I would. That's what I would do.
Yeah.
So Smart, are you asking that question just in terms of the question of portability just on like power efficiency, or is there something else to that?
Well,
Are you
just
asking as a Suzvara gatekeeping?
no. The reason I'm asking it is because it kind of goes back to the whole Grell thing with Grell kind of coming up now, and he's obviously known for making extremely high end headphones. High end meaning performance wise, cost kind of middle of the road cost wise, but when he started his new kind of venture, he's really targeting kind of the mass market. He's targeting the portable markets. He's doing IEM stuff, budget IEM stuff, or lower price IEM stuff. So I guess it goes back to the whole business thing that is it important to design something that's not a huge, potential monstrosity, which could sound incredible and maybe have the best acoustics ever, but it's not something you could walk around in your house with. Even you're kind of chained to your desk, and it's like a relatively potentially heavy headphone. Or is that kind of in your mind? And this goes back to the comfort thing. Is that in your mind that, hey, you know what, I want something lighter and potentially easy to drive that people could just take, connect, and then just go, and something that's more portable. And by offering that, there's more demand for your product, because who doesn't want a headphone that can do both, that can sound incredible when you're on a dedicated rig on a desk, or when you're on a DAP, or even your phone or whatever.
Well, that question actually might have a lot more nuance than you might think.
Yeah.
Audiophiles have a lot of interesting demands as a market, and so some of them genuinely do want something that is gargantuan and massive, and that sounds exactly the way they want, and they will only use it plugged into their giant source amp on their desk and be completely happy with spending lots and lots of money on that, and that's great. And then there are then there's the PortaPro warriors who will only use PortaPro, and that is the highest fidelity thing ever, and it is portable everywhere. So there's a lot in between that, which I think all of us are trying to kind of isolate and grab for ourselves.
I don't think the PortaPro warriors are really considering the portability of it as like a major strength.
I'm just
I
gonna
think
shout out PortaPro. I'm sorry.
no, I mean PortaPro is great. It's set a standard, and NKSC 75, right? It's like price performance goat.
Yeah.
But I think at least in this market, most people aren't really concerned with portability. Most people are looking at using something mostly at their desk, especially if it's like a higher priced, more luxury kind of headphone. I think as you go lower in price, maybe that becomes more of a consideration. Or if you're in the IEM market, right, then you're obviously buying something because it's very portable, or it doesn't take up a lot of space. One or the other. But in general, I would say that most people shopping in this space, like at least from what we've seen, open headphones are much more popular to sell than closed headphones. And an open headphone, just by its operation, is not great in a portable kind of setting, like where you're mobile, right? Like if you're sitting in your hotel room when you're traveling, that's one thing, but it's not something you're really gonna necessarily want to walk around outside with. So I don't think that it's something a lot of people are thinking about when they're making these purchases. Usually they are planning to just kind of use it at their desk with their source stack.
Yeah, I think there's definitely things to consider. The price, you assume that someone has source equipment equal to the value of the headphone.
I think in my case, very specifically, the Everest was. I mean, yeah, you can use it portably. It'll run off of any half decent DAP just fine. But like actually being used outside at any capacity was simply not a design factor whatsoever. Just wasn't a consideration. With the new platform, the idea is that it'll at least look kind of normal if you take it outside. But yeah, the chasing portability is kind of a different product altogether for me. That that's a different project, and yeah, I'm not against going in that direction, but yeah, so far it hasn't really it hasn't been the biggest determinator of anything.
Yeah, being super sensitive for us was a happy side effect, not a design consideration.
Let me tell you, being insensitive sucks.
I have the least sensitive headphone out right now. So
Do you?
What's the rating?
The Sierra the Everest is fine. normal. It's a normal sensitivity, whatever. But the Sierra is it's up there.
Really? Oh,
We're talking just because of
at work.
the weird bass boost stuff that's going on. It's like 20 ohms, but minus like 10 plus 12 dB sensitivity from the stock driver configuration. So yeah,
I went to Can
it's
Jam.
getting fun.
I went to Can Jam and I clipped every amp.
Very cool.
Not cool. No, not cool.
It's
Yeah, so sensitivity
actually
for me is like the one thing. It's just kind of like okay, whatever.
it's only after the fact that I appreciated how sensitive our stuff is. And now I use it that way. Actually, I primarily use it that way. So, but I'm still, even with our new products with the higher impedance driver, like the intention and the plan is for that to be used with desktop sources. I'm happy that I can use it portably, but it wasn't a consideration in the design again. So
Okay, and let's. I'm going to get to the final question here. So, what direction do you guys see headphones going? Because with all these kind of DSP things coming out, and there's that Smith realizer kind of that kind of technology. More and more there's technology coming out that's trying to mimic kind of more real sound, or more kind of a 2-channel presentation. Do you see headphones going in that direction, and eventually, maybe in 10, 20, 30 years, getting to a point where they make, having huge towers or bookshelf speakers and taking up a lot of space and having a huge hardware stack, that's kind of going to be all obsolete, and you're going to just have either headphones or IEMs, and with whatever technology, and it's going to mimic like the sound you get at a huge live venue, or with $1 million 2-channel system. Do you see that ever happening? Do you see that, or do you see that as a direction for headphones, or do you see them going in a different path?
I mean, I don't think headphones will ever replace speakers. Speakers conduct sound through your whole body. It's like a completely different experience from what headphones do. At the same time, yeah, I do think that there is a market for headphones that use DSP to simulate a 2-channel presentation, or a surround sound presentation. But I think it's going to stay mostly in the like wider consumer market. I don't see it making a lot of headway in the audiophile market. Um, and a lot of that for the reasons we just talked about. Like, people have these very expensive boxes stacked on top of each other that they want to use for headphones. And so there's gonna, I think, always be that place for um, wired headphones that don't have all of that technology built into them.
Gaz or one?
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, if we're talking about moving to the direction of trying to mimic live sound and things like that, um, if you're if you're talking about the wider consumer market, you have companies like Apple and, to an extent, Odyssey and Sony trying to do pretty much exactly that with, I think, fairly decent results so far. But yeah, like Rock said, you can't fully replace speakers or a concert venue. It's that's kind of a different experience altogether. And if you're trying to 100% recreate that, I think you might need to get your priorities in order. But I don't know. I do think that headphones, especially with DSP, are getting a lot better in that regard still. I'm pretty excited to see where 360 audio goes, and see how it affects our little corner of the market as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. I still think a lot of it depends on the anatomy of your ear. So I don't think it's
Well, that's one of the
universal.
major things that's trying
Yeah.
to be compensated for by all these companies.
What was that one headphone? The Neurophone, was it? That like
It goes in your
did
ear.
something.
Yeah, it's like a little thing in your ear canal.
It stuck a little thing in your ear canal, but there was also like it came with an application that kind of like mapped your ear, kind of like the Apple phones do now, right? Like
I tried
the
it.
AirPods Max do now, where it like uh uses, I don't know what to call it. It's kind of like echolocation, I guess, to kind of map the anatomy of your ear and make it a more convincing surround sound or like two channel presentation.
So
Yeah.
I actually, sorry, I actually tried it out, and it doesn't seem like it's doing a whole lot. To be honest, it just sounded like they EQ'd it to Harman the moment the setup finished. That's it.
For me, because my shape of my ears, the treble response is not right to my ears. You know, people always think you need to EQ everything and your ear shape matters, but like your brain has already adjusted to all of those things. I'm just not into it.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm not a big
good luck.
fan of it myself.
Yeah,
Um,
I think it sounds gross most of the time, but maybe
yeah,
that's a face thing. I don't know. I've heard a lot. I've heard a lot of manufacturers or brands trying to pitch me DSP IP to put into my stuff, but I'm just like, no. You literally got to pay me to do it. I'm not gonna do it. But I want headphones to be headphones, and I don't need them to sound like speakers. I mean, speakers are totally different. You can get a level of intimacy on headphones that you can't necessarily always get in speakers.
I agree.
Yeah, and
I
like
agree.
the targets for both shouldn't be the same,
Yep.
in my opinion. That's why I think house targets are better than a giant conglomerate telling you what they're doing to sell stuff, no matter how much research they have. Because I have research too. You know, I know what my customers like. They tell me,
Yeah.
right? So
No. I think ultimately, at least with smaller companies like ours, or even sort of, I guess I would consider them mid-size, like Odyssey or Dan Clark Audio or something like that. I think it, or ZMF. I think it does come down to the target, quote unquote, comes down to what the people designing the headphone are listening for, and sort of they're designing it to sound a particular way. So there is kind of a, even if it's not a formalized, frequency response that they're trying to hit, there's still sort of a house target kind of concept going on with each company, and how they ultimately make their thing sound before they feel it's ready to take it to market.
I think Zach can be quoted as saying that he designs headphones with with esoteric sound. You know, whatever that means to you, I think that's so cool that he said that because it defines his brand. I think very well. Like whether
Esoteric is a good word for his brand. Yeah.
yeah, whether you like it and you love it, and you know what experience it gives you, I think that is like a perfect way of putting it. Because you don't have to, we don't have to comply to what people want from us necessarily. I mean, yeah, you want people to like your stuff, but
Yeah. Yeah.
No,
No, ultimately, I feel like I'm probably one of the like pickiest people I know. So I'm more concerned with satisfying myself than anyone else.
oh yeah, how can you make a product that you don't like?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh.
I can't sell something that I don't like the sound of.
No, impossible. Yeah, we have like a code name for that headphone of everything we hate, but we know would sell. But I don't think it's ever gonna come to market. Uh, but about you, Juan?
Uh, sorry, I think I missed the initial question.
I don't know. I just threw it at you.
Oh, like whether I would release something that I don't like the sound of.
I mean, yeah, if you want to answer that, you can.
No, I mean in that regard, no. That's not something. That's something I would very much prefer not to do, to say the least. I don't know. Not sure how else to answer that.
I mean, what if you get enough requests, right? Like,
Ugh.
I get
I
I
mean,
get requests all the time for like from people that want a particular like flavor of headphone, and I'm not into flavor headphones. I'm very much against that
They're
whole
already flavored.
concept.
It's
right.
already a
Yeah,
thing.
I mean,
it's already my flavor, but that's the only flavor I'm gonna put out. I'm not gonna, you know, flavor
Maybe
it
the next one.
for you in particular.
Actually,
Maybe the next one we should.
that's something I wanted to mention too, Ruck. Is that I know your philosophy with headphones, but like, do you guys all agree that generally a good headphone does well with pretty much all genres? And is that important to you guys? I don't know if you guys like all genres. I don't know if you like, dislike certain genres, and then don't really factor that in when you're designing your headphone. Or do you feel like, if your headphone is really exceptional with a few key genres, but maybe not as good with others, that's fine to you, especially if you don't like those others. Like, what's your philosophy in terms of a specialist headphone versus an all-rounder headphone?
I just don't believe in specialist headphones. Like, I don't listen to all genres, but the genres I do listen to, I think encompass a wide enough array of instruments that I can judge pretty fairly whether it's kind of meeting the needs of that music or not, and of those different instruments and like the sort of the variety of sounds that are included there. But yeah, I don't believe in flavor headphones at all. I hear people talk about that and their collection of 20 headphones that they switch around between, and I can't imagine somebody sitting there with a playlist or like a mix that's generated by Spotify or something like that, and a song comes on and they're like, "Oh wait, I gotta put these headphones down and get these other ones and put those on before I listen to this." I just to me that's like it's silly. I want my headphones to be flexible enough that I can put anything on, and as long as it's a good quality recording, it's going to be enjoyable. And even if it's a bad quality recording, I want to hear that recording with all of its flaws and all. If I really love that piece of music, I don't care that there are flaws in the mastering or whatever. I still like that piece of music, and I'm going to listen to it.
But what about something like the HD 800 maybe not being that great for something like EDM or hip hop and rap, and then something like Atticus or whatever 12. I'll just say Atticus being exceptional for those because of the differences in their presentation, the bass presentation, that kind of thing. Do you feel that? So, like, I wanted to get clarity on your position. Do you feel that flavor headphones don't even exist, or do you feel a good headphone should be able to reproduce all music really well? So they should be excellent with classical and also excellent with EDM and rap.
So I think the question it's a matter of taste thing, right? Like how do you define does it really well? Um, if you pick things with uh sort of less compliant or non-compliant frequency responses because you like that particular frequency response and the other characteristics of that headphone for a particular genre of music, that comes down to your taste. I think the flavor versus not flavor discussion is more about the people and their particular approach and philosophy to music, um, rather than it is about you can design a headphone to sound, like I said, kind of neutral-ish, right? Whatever neutral is. Um, but if you don't enjoy that and you want a more colored presentation for certain kinds of music, then that headphone that is neutral-ish is not going to be quote unquote doing that well.
Yeah.
Right.
I have standards in my listening sessions. Like I don't. I want to hear the bad stuff. You know, I love the bad stuff in the music, like the clipping
Yeah.
and like the grime and the track. Like I want that, but I know some people don't, and I think that's okay. That's not my preference. There's other headphones that do that, but I don't think ours will get to that point. Because to me, the transient information is pretty important, and if you smooth out the transients too much, or there's too many like phase cancelizations, I don't know if I could listen to music on that.
Yeah,
I'd
I
just be too
agree.
distracted by knowing that I'm missing something.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think my question is, how do you uh, how do you even kind of like approach that, like what makes a headphone good for a genre? I don't really understand that.
Uh, it's,
Um,
it's so individual.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I
yeah,
think
And
it's a very
your
personal thing about how you approach how you listen to your music.
and it's your associated equipment. Like some people really want that smooth sound, but I do not. I want, I think that's where you and me, Ruck, we really agree on is like we're tubes. I want tubes to sound so fast, like
Yeah,
effortless. I don't want them to be warm. I mean, I don't mind if they sound big, but warm, no,
yeah,
no.
I agree.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I really appreciate it. It was a great discussion. Any final parting thoughts or anything you guys want to say about anything about your companies or anything we missed that you want to mention?
Um, I would just say buy our stuff and look out for our new stuff.
Yeah, I want to say the same thing. I'm kidding.
yeah. Same here. Arubusacoustics.com, arubus.squig.link. Check out the frequency responses of headphones as they are being developed. Uh,
Oh, that's cool.
yeah, and
You got a
wait for
squid
me
book?
to exit my hiatus.
Nice.
Oh, that is cool. Yeah.
We used to do
Yeah.
that. Uh,
Uh,
the new stuff is gonna blow your mind. That's about it.
very cool.
Awesome. I look forward to it. Okay, guys, thanks a lot. And until next time.
Thank you, Smon.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Spot.
you. Thank you.